So, we all know that Diablo IV is an awesome, forward-thinking, groundbreaking, and inspired game, in the eyes of Blizzard. So, tell me below what your biggest problems with Diablo IV are, because I'm going to go through some of mine right now. I've thought it, I've said it, you may have thought this during your playthrough as well, but overall, to me it feels like they released the game too early. They released this game as an unfinished product, and I often feel like I'm just a beta tester, testing perpetually. And we're 2 weeks into the inaugural season. Is D4 eventually going to be a rounded out game with lots of rich content and engaging interactions, memorable solo encounters outside of Lilith, and challenging multiplayer activities that don't make you feel like you're just... Maybe, probably, but there's a really good chance that the player base may have substantially dropped by then. And with games like Baldur's Gate 3 out and Path of Exile 2 coming, the review bombing, devs not exactly giving us much to be hopeful about, the player base may never recover. The game so far, post-release, has had so much work done during it that no one has any clue what the hell is going to come next. There were plenty of buffs and nerfs to classes, some justified, others insanely confusing and seemingly changed for Blizzard dev amusement. Then there were so many bugs and issues that needed addressing, some still do, and there are other things that just flat out don't work. Hello resistances. Gems still don't stack past 50. Hopefully they get their own material slots sooner than later because there's an insane lack of stash room. There's only 2 rows of aspect space in your inventory, yet consumables and equipment get 3. Your stash and inventory have no search functionality. The filtering system is terrible. The game is grindy, which is fine, but also has mass repetition of things lacking variety to be optimal. Not a good combo. The occultist charges you an arm and a leg and half your organs after a few enchantments, only to keep offering you the most unwanted, tragic, terrible options over and over. But at least the occultist lets you salvage sigils by ancestral or sacred. The blacksmith won't let you salvage by ancestral or sacred. I can mark things as junk, but why the hell can't I mark things to keep, so I can just salvage everything else? Why is my field of view so small unless I'm mounted or in certain boss fights or key areas? The Paragon boards have so many dead spaces to get from one board to another board, and from rare node to legendary node, etc. Plus it costs an insane amount to respec, especially when build testing multiple builds one after another. Oh wait, I can trade with people, and gold's a viable option for me to trade for, provided I have a great item. But how do I trade with people? Do I go third party and get banned for buying gold? Do I literally have to find them via the chat? Or wait for them to run past me? Oh wait a minute, I'll use the in-game trade system at the... Oh yeah, there is none. I remember another Diablo game that implemented one. Maybe that can be inspiration for this game's trading system. For the love of God, just put one in. Crowd control can be giga insane, and not all classes have the means to deal with it properly. Spiderwebs are just troll as hell. Post-death explosions and ground explosion sigil affixes are tedious to play around. Getting shot by off-screen monsters to add even more bullet hell to the game is shady as hell. Then there are game-breaking bugs popping up seemingly weekly, and some that have survived much longer. There's no map overlay. There's no option for players to enable one instead of having to spam tab all the time if we haven't memorized where we've been in these dungeons. And there aren't any meaningful MMO aspects to the game, despite it having the Lost Ark-like overworld. Keyword, meaningful. So there's obviously a lot more to it than this, but I'm just going to go over what's most problematic to me. And to be fair, the devs do know that in the past there's been a lack of communication with the player base, leading to terrible changes and a lot of lost opportunity for improvement. They even apologized at one point for taking some of the fun out of the game with major nerfs, and stated they'd be sure to post patch notes before patches hit and monitor our feedback, which is a positive step. And they're also implementing another stash tab, which is great. Unfortunately for seasonal characters, the stash tab is going to be filled with lots of malignant hearts. But hey, it's extra room nonetheless. Then there's the build variation and creativity option, with limited best-in-slot stats and tragic uniques. They had, and still have, the chance to make a lot of uniques viable, and finding them would be build-altering, but they're few and far between, and each class only has a few to even work with. So the best-in-slot is almost always 4 correct affixes, with a great aspect. Doesn't lend itself much to creativity, does it? But at least you can pet the dogs. So those are some of the minor issues I'm dealing with when I'm playing Diablo IV. The major issue I have is the lack of content in the endgame. For a seasonal player that's trying to optimize their leveling, You're going to be spending a lot of time, perhaps resetting strongholds, dungeons, or cellars, and you're definitely going to be, for the majority of your time, doing nightmare dungeons. So what's the endgame? Yeah, it's the same thing, you're going to be doing more nightmare dungeons. So what does this mean for late game leveling efficiency? Well, this means that almost everything on the overworld is, well, yeah, over. Once you've maxed your renown, you're hardly even going to be there unless you're sick of grinding dungeons and for some reason want the side quests to break that monotony and maybe learn more about the inhabitants of Sanctuary or whatever. But for me, it doesn't. It's just killing different monsters that aren't as efficient. But what else is up there? There's Helltides, Legions, or Loot Pinatas, aka World Bosses. Sure, Helltides are great, you need them for Fiend Roses and Forgotten Souls, and the monsters are 2 to 3 levels higher than you, so it's not bad on the XP, but they could have made it much more exciting. They could have had indicators for Helltide commanders. They could have buffed them up and gave them higher drop rates for meaningful aspects. Yeah, you know, the non-useless ones. They could have given people reasons to gather and defeat them without having to go out of their way. Maybe when the instance of your world kills a certain number of commanders in a Helltide, a greater demon of some descript will appear in, say, 2 minutes, and that will be indicated on the Helltide map if you're there. Just something more engaging to bring more of the MMO experience into this MMO ARPG WTF game. And for the love of God, just tell us where the mystery chests are so we don't have to third-party cite them. Having said that though, the Helltide is well and good, but the latter options are almost always pointless. The Legion is just a steamrolling comp stomp where demons and sea hags or whatever other monsters appear get blown to smithereens. It's basically only useful if it occurs in the Helltide, and maybe for early loot leeching. And the other event is just a giant pinata that takes on a monstrous shape only to be whacked left, right and center until it's spilling its guts all over the place in a matter of seconds. Yeah, seeing the world bosses for the first time is fun and it is exciting. For the 10 seconds they're alive, but after that, not so much. And if you don't show up at the perfect times for both of these things, they're even less optimal for increasing your character's level or power. So what about if you're level 100? Well, you don't need XP anymore. Where do you go to get loot? You push the higher tier dungeons, right? Well, no. You basically get the same loot from a tier 50 as you would from a tier 100. You get better glyph XP, sure, but outside of that, you should probably spam the lower tier dungeons, because there's literally no reason to do the higher tier nightmare dungeons for farming gear. It'll just take you way longer to get the same result. So quick recap, you've been doing the exact same dungeons, with the same regurgitated bosses at the end, with the same series of events, saving prisoners, collecting objects to put on pedestals because monsters love those things, collecting animus, destroying monuments, or whatever else. And you've been doing all of these things from near level 50 all the way to level 100. And then after that, your way of finding loot is, yeah, to continue doing the same dungeons. It's insane, almost by definition. Thank God there are different tile sets. So, what other endgame content is there? There's Lilith, and there's yeah, that's it. That's literally it. There's Lilith, and that's the problem. Surely you could optimize your build and farm Lilith for the best loot in the game and get even more powerful with that and do Lilith again and... No. No, you can't. Get back in the Nightmare Dungeon, you pleb. To be fair, the devs have said it's not their intention to have Nightmare Dungeons even be the endgame content. They've hinted at more pinnacle bosses, and high-end content, and the possibility of returning lesser evils. So that's another positive too. Gotta give them that. So once again, what does this mean? Is there hope? Yeah, there is hope. But that also means... Exactly, they released the game without anything that they intended to be endgame content outside of the one bullet hell pinnacle boss with the bugged out hitboxes that loves being staggered to death. So they released an unfinished game. And if a player isn't excited about the endgame, if they're not excited about what's supposed to be the rarest, most exciting loot, outside of Uber Uniques, which are essentially almost non-existent, if they're not thrilled about the speed and journey of the leveling experience, and the campaign has very limited replayability, then Actor Blizzard, you've got yourselves one hell of a problem. I'm hopeful for the game despite all of this, even still, and I do believe the game will improve significantly, hopefully soon. Maybe when we travel west in the expansion or something. But I do think we'll have engaging content that keeps the player base coming back season after season to slay hordes of demons. But until then...
I saved you. And I'm here to save you again. The parasites are merely a symptom of a greater sickness in Faerun.
Bye for now, like and subscribe and all that jazz. See ya!